Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. An interesting week in the movie industry. We have the return of Scary Movie 6, something that I didn't think I'd have the opportunity to say, given the current landscape that we're that we're in, where comedy is concerned. But I wanted to, I haven't done a whole lot of trailer reactions of late, but I wanted to cover this specifically because of because it ties in with what we've been discussing on the channel so far in terms of modern storytelling and why that is in decline, and partly because of censorship, right? That is a huge component of it. And Scary Movie is one of those franchises that over the course of the years, and just comedy in general, that has been affected by by the constant censorship and tone policing that has taken over the entertainment industry, right? So I thought this was a good trailer to sort of have that discussion. Uh, I do believe the Wayans were involved. The Wayan brothers were involved with Scary Movie 1 and 2, and maybe partially 3. Not My history on it is a bit muddy at the moment, but I'm sure they weren't involved with 4 or 5. Um, and it's interesting to see them return in the current climate that we're in. So this can either be a very good thing in that it could be a return to form for Hollywood, at least on the comedic side of things, or it could be them, capitulating to the usual suspects and toning the comedic elements down in an attempt to not offend any specific group. Right? That's where we are with comedy at the moment. But I'm hearing good things about this trailer. So if it is a return to, you know, people being allowed to laugh again, then this is definitely something I do want to discuss in a bit more detail. But let's jump into the trailer and then we'll have that larger discussion afterwards. So, Scary Movie 6, let's check it out. All right. Recognizing a few familiar faces. Not the guy with the hard eyes. Is that from The Purge? I'm not sure if I've seen that one. Megan.
Shit.
All right, he's back.
My God, he stabbed her. Not her. My pronouns are they, them. He stabbed them.
We back.
Okay, we're off to a good start here. We're off to a good start.
There's a serial killer on the loose.
Hello, Tuesday.
I have been
Tuesday.
preparing for this for years. Hello, Mother.
Okay, she's back.
You look like shit.
Should we hug? I really want to, but I'm a Republican now, so I'm supposed to be racist.
I think all white people are racist.
Okay, I
anyway.
love that.
Here.
I'm going to tell you why. Because it's funny on so many different levels. But she has a daughter now. I wonder if it's Bobby or if they continued with the other guy she was with. I'm not sure. Dinners. Oh, okay. Get out. All right. They're bringing back a few people. Yeah, Bobby's back. That's from Weapons. I haven't seen it, but it's on my list. Not sure what that's from. And Terrifier.
Santa gave me a severed arm. Be sure to thank him. What the?
Oh, okay. They've always been, pushing those boundaries when it comes to scary movie and doing things that people would just never do. And it's good to see them going back to that.
I'll be right or here eating my falafel and my pork rinds. Bitch.
All right, June 12th. June 12th. All right, that was good. That was good. I see, comedy, really well written comedy doesn't just make you laugh, but it also makes you, it also forces you to think, right? And I'm glad to see them introducing some of those elements there where it's not just haha, but it touches on certain topics that we've been discussing in society for a while now. So, for example, at the end there, well, first, even at the very beginning, right, with the woman getting stabbed, and she's more concerned about her pronouns than the fact that she had just been stabbed, and we've seen a lot of that rhetoric online where people are being charged with heinous crimes, and you're having a debate with people on Twitter, and someone will say, address him or her by their correct pronouns, and it's like, okay, well, we're talking about this horrible thing that they've just done, and that's your concern. So it's good to see them making a mockery of that absurdity, and the pronoun thing being absurd in and of itself is funny. Um, and then towards the end there, where we see the little girl getting a gift from the Terrifier, and the mom, she's saying, Santa just gave me a severed arm. And the mom responds with, be sure to thank him, because she's down on her phone, not paying attention to her child. And again, that speaks to where we are now, where that is now parenting. The parents have left the chat, and no one is watching their children because they're preoccupied with Facebook and Instagram and all these ridiculous things, and not with what their child is actually consuming. So I'm glad to see that they're not just going for surface level laughs, but also touching on important topics that we should be having in society. So that is good. That is good. It does feel like a return. The huge question is, will this land with audiences, right? And it's tricky for Scary Movie because the current generation doesn't have the fond memories of the first Scary Movie 1 or 2 or any of that. So what they'll need to do is to try to, use social touchstones milestones that will appeal to this generation, while trying to get laughs out of the Scary Movie fans. So they're trying to appeal to two different generations here, and it's going to be tough. If they pull it off, it'll be great. And they've done the smart thing here in bringing back some of the old cast, which would address the Scary Movie fans from 1 and 2. So they brought back a lot of those characters. And Mr. They brought back Doofy for one thing, but then the guy with the mangled hand, his strong hand. So they brought him back as well. And for the people who enjoyed Scary Movie 1 and 2, and then for the younger generation now, they're pulling from horror films from their generation, right? With Sinners and Get Out, and Weapons and so on. So it could be very good. It could be very good. If all goes well, I can see this doing very well. And personally, I can say this is one of the few movies that I'm excited for this year, because we've all seen what Hollywood has been putting out, and that brings us into our next conversation, right? Which is the state of modern storytelling, and censorship, and how that has impacted movies and stories in general, and that's something that people take very lightly. How harmful censorship can be, and we have seen it in video games. Gamers have been complaining about that, where there've been a series of remakes over the past year or two, where a lot of the characters, particularly the female characters, end up being censored, not the males, which is interesting, right? We just had Resident Evil Requiem released, and obviously, and the current debate at the moment is pointing out the hypocrisy where they've made Leon ridiculously attractive. He looks, to me, he doesn't really look great. He looks like his face is plastic. They allowed women to design it, and of course, the design itself is a bit unrealistic in terms of, he just looks like a doll, right? But at the end of the day, they made him as attractive as possible, right? And had him being shirtless in scenes and all of that. And of course, the female character in Grace looks like she's a librarian, an 90-pound librarian, right? So to point, the gamers currently are pointing out the hypocrisy of that, censoring the female character but not the male character. So a lot of that happens in gaming. And then in film and TV, It's more along the lines of tone policing and restricting what can or can't actually be said. And that is something that really, really needs to be addressed when it comes to video game and entertainment. So, in large part, I think what people mainly talk about, or the conversation a lot of times gets pushed more towards overt censorship, which would be more, you know, the pronouns discussion, right? Okay, you can't use this particular word, or you have to use this particular word. But what doesn't get talked about a lot is the more nuanced and subtle censorship, which is typically, in my opinion, the most dangerous. Right? We can use an example similar to, let's use the Gillette commercial that came out, that everyone remembers from a year or two ago, right? Where Gillette put out that commercial, effectively lambasting men and masculinity, and berating men to say that, how male behavior is toxic. Now, imagine being in the room where this ad was pitched, and I guarantee you there were people in the room when they saw that sample, and those people objected to what they were seeing. Well, what would typically happen in that room is, someone has an objection to what was presented to them. In a in the days of old, when men were allowed to speak frankly in these conversations, someone would have abruptly said, "This is garbage, and this will not appeal to our customer base. You need to get rid of it and come back with something else." That would have been the conversation. Now, again, as we feminize much of these industries, what now happens is the men in the room are censoring themselves. It's not overt; they're not being told what to say, but they would respond with something akin to, "I'm not sure whether this will resonate with the audience." Now, if you compare that response to the one I gave earlier, the one I gave earlier was very direct and highlighted the actual problem and what actions need to be taken to address it. This response is very vague. It doesn't necessarily address the issue or present a solution. It's just a softening of the tone and a revisioning of what the person actually feels. And the person is doing that themselves because they've been trained to not offend the people in the room. And if they do make the suggestion that this doesn't appeal to a specific demographic, then by default it means they're offending the other demographic. So that is the danger when it comes to subtle, censorship, right? Because the person who presented that sample, or pitched that ad campaign would then return to their desk, and their takeaway would be, all right, one person objected in the room, but the person said they're not sure whether this would resonate, right? The person is not sure, which means that it's a possibility that this could actually do very well, right? They just said they aren't sure. So I can maybe tweak it a little bit, but I don't need to change it too much because they said they weren't sure. And so they proceed with the ad, and we get what we got, which is a horrible ad. And Gillette suffered for it and lost millions because men felt they had no place being told how to be men. And worse, if it is that you are a brand that is appealing to a male base, then the men are who you should be asking what masculinity should be, not women. And so that is the danger of this more subtle, nuanced censorship that doesn't get talked about often enough. It's the policing of the tone that you use, how you speak. And it's interesting. George Carlin had a bit about this. I forget the name of it, but he did a clip about this, about how words have changed over the course of the last few decades. To not to be more sensitive and not be offensive, and how it takes away from the actual outcome and the result that you want because you're more focused on the process and how that process makes someone feel. Unfortunately, and we've all seen, the where how that has affected comedy. We've gotten less and less things like Scary Movie over the past few years. A lot of, rom-coms and raunchy comedies, like American Pie and stuff like that, have just fallen to the wayside, and it's not coincidental. It's very much intentional. These are typically targeted towards a male base. And when you remove that element, because and people downplay the importance of the male perspective here, but when you remove that element, you receive products that are subpar. That's going to be the result, and that's the result that we are seeing now. So I'm glad to see the Wayans brothers are, presumably back. This is just a trailer. We don't know what the outcome is. We could this seems like a strong trailer, but we could watch it and receive something completely different. I don't know. I'm hoping not, because I'm looking forward to this. And hopefully this will be a signal for other comedians or other writers to see that there is a path forward, and that we do need to get back to being able to speak more openly and frank, and that is part of comedy, right? A part of comedy is making light certain situations that you otherwise would not find funny, but life is it's something you often need. You need to make light of you have to, right? Otherwise, we've seen where depression is at an all-time high, right across the board. We need people to laugh, right? We need people to laugh. um and we need to get back to that point where we can just laugh at anything without people feeling offended, because to to speak truth, to make jokes, you have to risk being offensive, you have to risk offending, and that is what has been lost. And I leave it with this, because what was it I was watching recently? I think it was some video interview on campus or something, and the two males were having a joke with each other, and it dawned on me that, and this is something that I'm sure, if you're a man, this is something that you've clearly experienced. If you're a woman, likewise, it's the same thing, or at least not exactly the same. But when you put two men in a room, no matter how different those two men are, right? If they're from different backgrounds, different races, different ethnicity, or whatever the case may be, they will find some common ground that they can laugh with each other, right? Which is why more often than not, when men go out, they go to bars and stuff like that, and usually there isn't a female element there, because the moment you inject a woman into the room, something that is said between those two men then becomes offensive, and then no one laughs, because it's now you're now forced to take that as something you need to dissect and deconstruct as to why you said this, instead of, this thing is just funny. I don't need to think about why it is. It just is. It's just a natural reaction. So that is the state of entertainment at the moment, and hopefully, Scary Movie 6 is a path forward for comedy to make a return. We do need to see a lot more. We have been seeing a few of those rom-coms coming back lately. They're not in, not a huge amount of them, but we have been seeing a few. I think Sydney Sweeney came out with one at some point. I'm not sure how well it did. Jennifer Lawrence came out with one, I believe, a year ago as well. Or I think maybe that was like 2 years ago. So they are spaced out, but we are seeing slowly some return to that. But it's still, even with the ones that are being made, it's the ones that are being made for women. It's not, the male raunchy comedies that we used to get, right? because there's still some boundaries there that okay, we can't cross that and give the men free reign to say or do something funny. So we're not quite there yet, but we are making progress, and I do hope Scare Movie will be the first of many to return to that era of comedy. All right, guys, that is it for Scare Movie 6. Thank you for stopping by. Hopefully, when Scare Movie 6 comes out, we can have a good laugh and chat. All right, so I'll see you next time.